She was just another passenger, waiting for her flight at a crowded airport. She was well-dressed and calm. But to two airport police officers and a wealthy white passenger, her presence, a successful black woman, was an eyesore. She was stopped for no reason and subjected to prejudicial, probing questions about her business class ticket and her finances, questions no white passenger should have to face. When she protested, rightly, demanding respect and basic civil rights, hell broke loose. She was subjected to vicious insults, slurs aimed directly at her skin color that echoed through the stunned crowd. They shouted at her, threatened her, and then the worst happened. She was handcuffed. Right there, in front of hundreds of people, the woman was treated like a criminal, publicly humiliated, all because of someone else's blind racism and vicious words. But these two policemen, in their arrogance and abuse of power, made a terrible mistake. A mistake that would change their lives forever. They had no idea who the woman they were escorting away really was. She's no ordinary passenger. She holds one of the most powerful positions in the American judicial system. What will happen when the truth comes out at the airport police station? How will the two policemen react when they realize who they have attacked? Will their belated pleas save anything? And what price will they, and the person who provoked them, pay? Let's follow this dramatic story. The international airport on a Friday afternoon is a symphony of controlled chaos. The loudspeakers blare out flight announcements in perfect English mixed with the various languages of the bustling crowd. The clatter of suitcase wheels on polished marble floors is joined by laughter, ringing phones, and the cries of a few tired children. The air smells of freshly brewed coffee, perfumes of all kinds, fast food, and the constant recycling of air conditioning. On large electronic boards, green and red letters continuously update information on incoming and outgoing flights, a constant flow of movement and connection. At Gate B12, where Atlantic Airlines Flight 788 was about to depart for Chicago, a crowd of passengers was gathering. Some were sitting, some were standing, some were scrolling through their phones, some were reading, all of them looking a little impatient. Among them, Audrey Hayes was standing quite close to the front of the priority passenger line. At nearly 50 years old, she exuded a serious, intellectual, yet somewhat tired air after finishing an important 3-day legal conference. She wore straight-leg black trousers and a light vest over them. Her low-heeled shoes were comfortable but still elegant, suitable for a long flight. No fancy jewelry, just an elegant watch on her wrist and a good-quality dark brown leather handbag neatly placed on the small suitcase beside her. She was on her way home, looking forward to a quiet weekend. To maintain privacy, she traveled alone, without a secretary or security guard accompanying her. While patiently waiting for her turn to board the plane, she took the opportunity to skim through some important documents on her tablet. Not far from Hayes in the same line was Mrs. Abigail Prescott. In stark contrast to Hayes's calm demeanor, Mrs. Prescott, a white woman in her 60s, appeared extremely impatient and annoyed. She was dressed head to toe in designer clothes, with diamonds sparkling on her neck and arms, her face carefully made up but frowning, constantly glancing at her watch and sighing heavily. Her eyes swept the crowd with disdain, lingering for a long time on Hayes with a frown of displeasure. In Prescott's narrow and prejudiced worldview, a black woman could not possibly be in the same priority line as her, could not possibly be eligible to fly business class. She muttered something to her companion, or to herself, loud enough for a few people around her to hear, some insinuations about, "The times are crazy," and "Everyone gets priority." Not stopping there, Prescott decided to take action. She swaggered up to the gate agent's desk, her tone both coquettish and commanding. "Hey, you! Why do I have to wait with those people?" She jerked her chin toward Hayes. "Look at her, she looks suspicious. She's been staring at my luggage all this time. I don't feel safe flying with people like that. They must have used fake papers to get into business class. You should check." The young female gate agent was confused and embarrassed by Prescott's arrogant attitude and baseless discriminatory words. She tried to explain the boarding process and that Hayes had full privileges, but Prescott was not listening and continued to make a fuss. The commotion attracted the attention of two airport police officers patrolling nearby, Officer Dave Riley and Officer Sean Baxter. Riley, the older of the two with a weary but seasoned face and a keen but implicitly racist gaze, glanced over the situation. Baxter, the younger and more aggressive-looking, also approached curiously. Mrs. Prescott was struck gold when she saw the police. She turned around immediately, her tone changing from commanding to whining, complaining, but no less venomous. "Oh, you two police officers, thank goodness. Please help me. That black woman," she pointed at Hayes, who was standing silently observing, "looks very suspicious. She keeps looking at me and my bag with strange eyes. I'm really scared to be near her on the plane. Please check her thoroughly. We can't let bad elements on the plane." She skillfully sowed suspicion and unfounded fear, exploiting racial prejudice to achieve her selfish goals. Officer Riley, with his preconceived notions, almost immediately believed the well-dressed white woman. He looked at Hayes with suspicion. Officer Baxter, younger and more excitable, quickly joined in, looking at her with hostility. They saw this as an opportunity to exert power and solve the problem in the simplest way, by targeting the accused, regardless of the absurdity of the accusation. Officer Riley and Officer Baxter walked straight toward Hayes, their gait somewhat stiff, deliberately creating a tension and pressure. The passengers in the waiting line parted reluctantly, watching with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Ma'am," Riley said first, his voice trying to be neutral but still laced with coercion and disrespect. "Would you please step out of line? We need to talk to you privately." Hayes, though surprised by this sudden intervention, maintained her composure. She looked at the two policemen, then glanced quickly at Mrs. Prescott, who stood nearby with her arms folded and a triumphant half-smile on her face. She understood what was happening. She quietly stepped out of the line as requested. "What is it, officers?" she asked, her voice steady and fearless. "We have received a complaint from another passenger that you are behaving suspiciously and may pose a security risk to the flight," Riley said bluntly, repeating Prescott's venom almost verbatim, but in a tone that made it sound like a proven fact. "We would like to request your identification and boarding pass for inspection." Hayes opened her bag, calmly took out her driver's license and business-class boarding pass, and handed them to Riley. "These are my documents, perfectly valid," she said. "But I want to know, what exactly is the suspicious behavior that I'm being accused of? And who made that complaint? I was just standing there waiting to board like any other passenger." Baxter, more impatient and aggressive, immediately interjected. "Why do you ask so many questions? If the police ask, just do it. Your attitude is suspicious." Riley took Hayes's papers, glanced at the name and photo, then looked back up at her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, stopping at her formal attire and expensive handbag. "Audrey Hayes." He muttered the name. "Business class?" He smirked. "How did someone like you—" He left the sentence hanging, the racial and class slur obvious. "Get this ticket? What do you do for a living? Are you sure this is your ticket?" The blatant insult broke Hayes's silence. She felt the blood rush to her face, but she kept her voice under control. "You are speaking to me based on personal prejudice and the slander of others, not on any actual evidence. What class of ticket I travel in or what profession I hold is absolutely none of your business within the bounds of the law." She looked Riley straight in the eye, then Baxter, her voice growing firmer. "I am a citizen of the United States, a lawful passenger, and I have the right to be treated with respect and without discrimination. Your questioning, your words, and your attitude are unacceptable and a serious violation of my civil rights and the police code of conduct." She held out her hand. "Now, I'm going to ask you to return your papers to me, and I want both of your names and badge numbers." Hayes's forceful, unflinching defiance and sharp words were a blow to Riley and Baxter's complacency and self-imposed authority. They had grown accustomed to people, especially people of color, being afraid and submissive to uniformed police. This defiance infuriated them. "What? You dare to talk nonsense?" Baxter shouted, his face red, moving menacingly closer to Hayes. "Who do you think you are? We are the law here. You dare to defy the police?" Riley lost his cool, too, his old man face now twisted in anger. "You impudent black man. Who do you think you're talking to? You must be playing dumb lawyer again. I'm telling you, we have the right to do whatever it takes to ensure safety. You don't want to get on this flight anymore, do you? Or do you want to go to jail?" The two police officers began to blatantly curse and openly racial slurs right in the middle of the crowded gate area. Their voices grew louder and louder, attracting the attention of everyone around them. The passengers were stunned, many of them visibly upset, but no one dared to intervene out of fear. The gate agent tried to step in to mediate, but Riley waved him away. Mrs. Prescott stood there, arms folded, a wickedly satisfied smile on her face. She had achieved her goal, to cause trouble for the black woman she hated. Hayes, though her heart was clenched with anger and pain at this public humiliation, managed to maintain her last shred of dignity. She took a deep breath. "Your actions have gone too far. You will be held accountable to the full extent of the law for what you are doing." "Take responsibility?" Riley sneered, his eyes flashing with cruelty. "Let's see who's responsible. You're under arrest. Arrest this woman immediately for disturbing public order at the airport, disobeying orders of officers on duty, and threatening flight safety." He shouted out the fabricated charges, determined to arrest the woman who dared to challenge him. As soon as Officer Riley uttered the absurd arrest warrant, Officer Baxter sprang into action with his usual ferocity. He lunged forward, grabbing Hayes's arm with force. She flinched in response, but made no attempt to physically resist. She knew that would only give them more ammunition. "You have no right to do this. Let go of my hands," she protested vehemently, her voice ringing clearly through the tense silence of the watching crowd. But Baxter ignored him. He used his strength to twist Hayes's arms behind her back. The cold metal clanged as he pulled the shiny handcuffs from his belt. He clumsily but deliberately tightened the cuffs around her wrists, the cold metal cutting into her flesh, causing excruciating pain and humiliation. The whole thing happened in front of hundreds of people at the B-12 gate. Hayes was handcuffed and publicly humiliated simply because of the color of his skin and the incitement of another racist. It was a shocking scene, a blatant affront to the rule of law. Riley stood there, arms folded, looking at the handcuffed Hayes with a look of satisfaction on his face. He was still muttering insults. Mrs. Prescott, standing not far away, smiled a smile of satisfaction that she could not hide. She had succeeded in removing the unpleasant intruder. "Come on!" Baxter shouted, shoving Hayes in the back, forcing her to move. They began to march her away, not toward the boarding gate, but toward security and the airport police station. It was a march of shame. Hayes, handcuffed behind her back, tried to keep her back straight, walking with what little dignity she had left. She felt hundreds of eyes on her. Curiosity, pity, fear, and perhaps contempt from some who shared her prejudices. But her gaze was fixed straight ahead, unwavering. Her sharp brain was working at full speed, registering every face, every detail, preparing for her next move. They led her through the crowded corridors of the airport, where the noise seemed to add to the sense of humiliation. Finally, they reached the airport police station, a small makeshift office tucked away in a corner of the vast terminal. They ushered Hayes into the check-in room, where a duty officer was sitting behind a metal desk. Riley and Baxter aggressively reported the incident, painting Hayes as a disruptive, dangerous passenger who had resisted police. They handed her identification to the duty officer. The officer on duty, who seemed used to airport chaos, began the mechanical process of entering information. He entered Hayes's name, age, and address into the computer. She cooperated quietly, her voice calm and clear. After entering basic information, the officer asked a routine question. "What is your occupation?" Riley and Baxter stood nearby, arms crossed, smirking, waiting to hear what mundane profession this nigger would reveal. Hayes took a deep breath. She raised her head, looked straight into the eyes of the duty officer, then her cold gaze swept over Riley and Baxter, who had not yet realized the nightmare that was about to befall them. Her voice rang out, not loud, not shaky, but clear, coherent, and filled with undeniable authority. "I am Chief Judge Audrey Hayes of the Federal Court of Appeals." For a moment, the small room of the airport police station seemed to freeze. The officer on duty dropped the pen he was holding. His eyes widened, his mouth gaping. "Chief Justice, the Court of Appeals of the United States, one of the highest and most powerful judicial positions in America?" He stared at the black woman standing before him, then quickly looked down at his identification, then back up at her, cold sweat starting to break out on his forehead. He knew he was facing a disaster of the highest order. But the duty officer's reaction was nothing compared to Riley and Baxter. The world beneath the two abusive cops seemed to shatter into pieces the moment they heard that title. The smug smiles on their faces disappeared. Their faces went from red with anger and smugness to ashen white in an instant. Their eyes widened, looking at Judge Hayes as if they saw death standing before them. What had they done? Who had they stopped? Who had they insulted? Who had they handcuffed? A federal appeals court judge? The man with the power to hear the biggest federal cases? The man who could ruin the career of anyone in law enforcement with a single ruling? The sheer terror, the fear of losing everything, jobs, honor, freedom, swarmed through their minds like a devastating tsunami. Their limbs went limp. Riley staggered back, his back hitting the wall. Baxter stood frozen, his whole body shaking uncontrollably, his breathing coming in rapid, labored gasps. Once the initial shock wore off, the basest survival instincts kicked in. They realized they had to do something, anything, to try to salvage the situation. Chief Justice Hayes," Riley stuttered, his voice shaking so much it was almost inaudible. He tried to move closer, his legs like rocks, his eyes filled with fear and pleading. Oh God, we really didn't know. We're sorry. 1,000 times sorry. This is just a terrible misunderstanding. An unforgivable mistake." Baxter also came back to his senses in a panic. He fell to his knees on the floor right there, tears starting to flow. "Please, Judge. Please forgive our ignorance. We only listened to the feedback. We were too angry. Please, Judge, have mercy. Don't destroy us. We have wives and children at home." The pathetic, despicable pleas of the two men who had been so violent and brutal just a moment ago now echoed in the small room, but could not erase the disgust and anger in the eyes of those who were witnessing. Judge Audrey Hayes stood there, dignified and stoic, unmoved by the tears and desperate pleas of the two police officers kneeling at her feet. The humiliation and pain she had just suffered could not be assuaged by this belated and abject remorse. She had seen too much weakness and deceit in the courtroom to be fooled by this clumsy drama. She turned to the officer on duty, who was standing there dumbfounded, her voice calm but filled with undeniable command. "Officer, I request you to release my handcuffs immediately." The officer, startled, hastily searched for the key and tremblingly opened the metal handcuffs that were tightly clasping the judge's wrists. Red marks were clearly visible on her skin. "Now," Judge Hayes continued, rubbing his wrist, "call your airport police chief immediately. Let him know I am here and ask him to come immediately. Also, Contact the U.S. Marshal's office in this area and the Chief of Staff of the U.S. District Court of Appeals. Report the situation. I want their representatives here as soon as possible." Her voice was no longer that of a detained passenger, but that of a head of the judiciary, giving clear and precise instructions. The officer on duty did not dare to delay, immediately picked up the phone and made the calls, his voice still trembling with shock and fear. The news that Chief Justice of the Court of Appeals of the United States, Audrey Hayes, had been illegally detained and insulted by 2 airport police officers sent a real shockwave through the airport management system and related law enforcement agencies. In less than half an hour, the airport police chief, along with his deputy chiefs and senior airport security officials, arrived at the police station, their faces pale, showing extreme tension and anxiety. Soon after, agents from the U.S. Marshal's Service, the federal agency responsible for protecting federal judges and courts, arrived, along with the marshal and several senior staff members from the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, where Judge Hayes served. The simultaneous arrival of high-ranking officials from multiple agencies turned the small airport police station into the center of a major crisis. The atmosphere became extremely tense. The airport police chief immediately went to see Chief Justice Hayes, bowed his head, expressed his deep apology and infinite regret for the unacceptable behavior of his subordinate. He pledged to conduct a serious investigation and handle the matter seriously. An emergency conference was held on the spot. Judge Hayes, assisted by the chief clerk of the court, recounted the entire incident in detail, objectively and clearly, from the time of Mrs. Prescott's provocation, the prejudiced intervention of officers Riley and Baxter, the insulting remarks, to the arrest and public handcuffing. After hearing the testimony, the airport police chief had nothing left to defend. Before Chief Judge Hayes and the federal officials, he immediately made a decision. Officer Dave Riley and Officer Sean Baxter were suspended indefinitely. He ordered that they be immediately stripped of their weapons, badges, and all equipment, and ordered the Airport Police Internal Affairs Division to work closely with the FBI to open a full criminal investigation into the incident. An order was also issued to seal all relevant evidence: security camera data at Gate B12, body camera data of Riley and Baxter, and official statements from all airline and security personnel present at the scene. In particular, identifying and interviewing Mrs. Abigail Prescott was a top priority. Investigators quickly determined her identity and flight. If she had not yet departed, she would be detained for questioning. If she had boarded the plane, the information would be passed on to authorities at her destination. She would be questioned about providing false information, signs of slander, and inciting police discrimination. She was clearly informed of the possibility of facing serious criminal charges, such as making false statements to a public authority. Faced with body camera evidence and witness testimony, including 2 police officers who had now exposed her in hopes of reducing her charges, Prescott lost her initial haughtiness and instead appeared fearful and weakly tried to deny the charges. The immediate consequences have been served, but real justice has only just begun its journey. The joint investigation by the Airport Police Internal Affairs Division and the FBI Civil Rights Division was swift and thorough. The evidence against Officer Dave Riley and Officer Sean Baxter was overwhelming and incontrovertible. Gate security camera footage, body cam data, and consistent testimony from Judge Hayes and other witnesses painted a picture of abuse of power, racial profiling, and unlawful detention. Mrs. Abigail Prescott's role in inciting and providing biased information was also determined to be a key factor in the escalation of the incident. After the investigation concluded with clear charges, the professional consequences for the 2 officers came quickly. Based on the seriousness and inexcusability of the offense, the airport police chief made the final decision: permanently dismiss Officer Dave Riley and Officer Sean Baxter from the airport police force. However, losing their jobs was just the beginning of their legal troubles. Due to the serious nature of the case, especially the violation of a citizen's civil rights and the fact that the victim was a high-ranking federal judge, the U.S. Attorney's Office decided to prosecute both former officers. They face serious federal criminal charges including violating civil rights under color of law, unlawful detention, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. The trial of Riley and Baxter took place in federal court and attracted a great deal of public attention. The prosecution presented a strong case, complete with video evidence, witness testimony, and the powerful testimony of Judge Hayes himself. The defense was largely ineffective against the overwhelming evidence. Ultimately, the jury found both Riley and Baxter guilty on the underlying charges. The federal judge who presided over the case was extremely stern in his sentencing remarks. He emphasized the dangers of law enforcement acting on racial bias and misinformation, the betrayal of public trust, and the need for a deterrent sentence. Given the seriousness of the case, which involved the unlawful arrest and assault of a federal judge, the court sentenced each defendant to 4 years in federal prison. While some may view the sentence as disproportionate to the harm caused, it is a severe sentence under current sentencing guidelines and sends a clear message that abuse of power will not be tolerated. For Mrs. Abigail Prescott, her role in inciting and making false statements did not go unpunished. Faced with the possibility of criminal prosecution for making false statements to a federal agency, a crime that could have resulted in a prison sentence, and the threat of a large civil lawsuit from Judge Hayes seeking damages, Prescott's attorney quickly negotiated a deal. To avoid a lengthy criminal trial and further public humiliation, Prescott agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge and accept a hefty financial penalty, a fine of up to $500,000. It was a steep price to pay for her racist and vicious behavior. The story ends with justice, albeit in different ways, being served to all those at fault. It serves as a bitter but necessary lesson for police forces about the importance of objectivity, respect, and accountability. It also serves as a wake-up call to society about the dangers of implicit bias and the consequences of using toxic language to attack others. Chief Justice Audrey Hayes, despite her horrific and humiliating experience, continued her work with unshakable dignity and steadfastness. The incident did not break her, but rather strengthened her resolve to fight for a fair and equal justice system that would not tolerate discrimination or abuse of power. She knew the fight was long, but she would never back down. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.